Welcome to another edition of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast.
All right, and we are back with another edition of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast. With me, as always, is my co-host, Colt.
Yet again.
Good to see you, my brother.
You too, man.
Good to be back in front of the microphones with our new mic stands, our new setup, man. We're growing.
We are definitely growing. We got a mixer last week. We got mic stands this week. We're almost professionals now, right?
I'm telling you, we're getting there. It's a good thing. So, the week has been a week, right?
Yeah.
For you?
Yeah.
I really have not much to say, not much going on. For I guess for me and my wife and kids, it was really a kind of a spin down of the holidays, which are so hectic because we have, holiday weekend, and then we go through another week, then we have another holiday weekend, and then after that it's like, finally get to take some time and relax. So
yeah, it was same here. We had with work and stuff, it's like you have a 3-day weekend because we got Monday off on both for Christmas and for New Year's. So it's a short week at work, but those short weeks at work are always the longest ones because you're like, oh, I only have to work 4 days this week. And then you're like, get to Thursday and you're like, oh my gosh, this week's never going to end.
Yeah, this is still going on.
Uh-huh.
This is still happening.
Uh-huh.
It throws me off because I had the 2 Mondays off as well, and it just completely threw off my schedule. I was just lost for like a couple days. And it took me a while to get back into the swing of things.
Right.
So there is that time, too, that was completely wasted, completely jacked up because I was just lost.
Right.
I didn't know what I was doing anymore. You can't break my routine or else things fall apart.
Right. I'm the same way.
Right. You got to have that structure. So
Yeah.
Podcast challenge.
Yes, sir.
You had a couple of podcasts that I challenged you to listen and analyze and then give your opinion and commentary on today. So what do you got for us today?
All right, first one. You gave me two of them. First one I'm going to hit on is going to be the Audacity to Podcast. So this is with Daniel J. Lewis, is his name.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically the podcast to podcasting is the way I put it. Basically a podcast to let you know or to show you how to better your podcast that you're doing, which is great. And I see, I've only listened to this one episode, but I can see there's a lot of benefits to it. And it's going to help us out in the long run, I think, by listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
The only issue I had with this one is that the episode was called, Is Your Podcast a Reference or a Habit? Okay?
Right.
So, I get it, and I get the term, but it was literally like a half an hour of him saying, is your podcast a reference or a habit?
Yeah.
And I get what he's saying. So, basically, are we using this podcast as something that's going to bring people back every single week? Or are we using this podcast as to where an episode can be a reference to where somebody wants the knowledge of what we're putting out in one episode to where they can listen to that one episode and then be done with it because they got what they wanted out of it.
Right.
So basically, are we bringing people back every week with what we're putting out?
Yeah.
In my opinion, so far, I think we're doing a pretty good job because we're trying to, especially with this podcast challenge, we're bringing a lot of other podcasts into ours, which is great. But we're also being able to, we can bring in a wide variety of people into our podcast because we hit different topics every week. With that also, and with each podcast we listen to, we're able to bring out different topics of that and branch off of that as well.
Yeah. I like the Audacity to podcast because it is a reference, but it's a reference that becomes a habit, right? Because you want to keep increasing your knowledge of the craft,
right?
The podcasting craft. And he brings in some of the episodes, not so much. I'm like, I don't, this doesn't apply to me, or I'm not really interested, so on and so forth. But I keep coming back and looking for new pertinent episodes that I can use because, it's like if you had a podcast on how to build a washing machine, or how to fix one, and your washing machine's broke, then obviously you need to hear that. So
right.
For anybody who's podcasting, anybody who wants to learn how or want to improve, I highly recommend the podcast.
Right. Like I said, I've only listened to one episode so far. I'm going to try to listen to some more. Even now I go back to the episodes that we've already done. and listen to them and just think of how listening, of course, we're our own worst critics, which we found out very fast. But I feel like I can just listen to myself and think about things that I might say over and over again and try to pull that out, or just things that I can work on myself, or things that we can collaborate on to try to make the podcast better for
Totally.
ourselves and for everybody listening. So
Yeah, amen, brother.
yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
What you got next?
So the other one I got is Curious Minds with Gail Allen. Okay. This one was neat. I liked it. It was so who she had Kathy O'Neill on. Okay. This woman wrote a book called Weapons of Math Destruction. Okay. So she deals a lot with algorithms and things like that. So a topic she hit on in the podcast that really something I never really thought about. She talked about this DC teacher named Sarah Wysocki, who got fired for a certain algorithm that they had placed in these poorer schools. Okay, so basically what this is this teacher does all her teaching throughout the year, and they have these standardized tests at the end of the year. But this algorithm they use is based on an expected score that these kids are supposed to get. So if they're supposed to get a 75 and they get an 80, she gets the credit for these kids getting those extra 5 points on this test. But if those kids get a 70, she's on the hook for those extra 5 points. So they can just because of this kind of thing, they can fire these teachers, or teachers quit because of this algorithm. So basically, what it's doing is it's supposed to be an algorithm that's supposed to be an expectation for that these teachers are supposed to get. But what it's really doing is forcing these teachers out of these poorer schools, to where they're going to richer schools that are actually doing better on these tests just because they're richer schools. It's forcing these teachers to richer schools and taking the good teachers out of poorer schools,
Right.
which isn't what they're isn't the goal by any means.
Yeah, it was an unintended consequence
Right.
of their metrics that they're using. Yeah.
Right. But she also hits on variables that makes this algorithm the wrong way to go about things, because she hits on variables like whether the children had breakfast that day, whether the room was hot that they were in and they didn't have air conditioning, whether the test was harder or easier on any given year. That apparently the tests changed, things like that, and things throughout the year that the children might go through that could cause their knowledge throughout the year to not be as great, like parents getting divorced or something like that, things that really take your attention off of schoolwork and put your attention elsewhere to where you don't really learn the things that you need to be learning. But that's not a teacher's it's not on the teacher to teach things like that when they don't have any what's the word I'm looking for?
They don't have any responsibility. They don't have any control.
That's
yeah,
what I'm trying to say.
okay.
They don't have any control over those situations. is
Sure,
what I'm
yeah.
trying to say.
Absolutely. And so this is another example of how in our modern times, cold hard calculations are just that. They're cold.
Right.
These are cold numbers that they're working with. And she also brought up an example of like insurance premiums. It's based on an algorithm. It's based on statistics and averages. It has nothing to do with whether or not I'm actually a good driver. It has to do with what class that I'm in as a person, not class, as in societal class, but what category I'm in. So I remember when I was 16, I just started driving. I hadn't had any wrecks yet, I hadn't had any speeding tickets, but yet my insurance was a lot higher than my sister when she started driving because I'm a male. I'm a 16-year-old male. And so that's just based off of a category, an algorithm, because statistically, 16-year-old males have a lot more car accidents and get more speeding tickets than what females do.
Right.
Although I don't know about that. They say that. I don't know if I believe what they say.
Right.
But yeah, so it's just another example of how technology and numbers are just so cold that it doesn't take in a lot of the human elements that, like you said, a teacher can't control. People can't control. And so it just puts us in a box in a lot of ways. And then we're the ones that have to pay for being in that box. And those kids in that school, they have no choice whatsoever, because they live in a underprivileged neighborhood or in an inner city, chances are is where that school, a lot of those schools are at. So they don't have a choice. They can't move. Their family can't move to a better school district. And because of all those other variables, those extraneous variables that cause them not to do well in that test, therefore, the unintended consequence is the teachers are leaving, and it makes the school even worse.
Right.
And that definitely wasn't, that wasn't the goal of this whole exercise, this whole algorithm.
Right. It's just like they're using statistics because it's the easiest way to come up with a resolve for basically trying to give these teachers expectations on what they need the knowledge they need to be expressing to these kids.
Right.
And I don't know, because I'm not in that world, but I don't know what the best way to do it is. I mean, I don't know that either one of us could come up with anything that could bring in the world circumstances also. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
to broaden it.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's a huge endeavor. It's a huge problem
Right.
to have to deal with. I don't have the answers.
Right.
I'm just sitting here talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about how the algorithms, they suck because it's not fair. They're missing the mark somehow, some way. So I think that the answer is for some collaboration of some of those really smart, statisticians or just, politicians, government officials, the school system, even the parents. They should definitely be involved to come together and figure out how to solve this problem.
Right.
Because you don't want it to go too far, because what happens is, and it's been happening probably since the beginning of time, but ever since the end of slavery, you had, okay, so we have all these people who are now free. So now what do? Well, for a long time they were just pushed aside and they were segregated, and this happened, just up until not too long ago.
That's crazy.
And to some degree, it still happens.
Mm-hmm.
You still have a lot of inner cities that ghettos and things like that where it cascaded from a disadvantaged point in time to where they were never given the opportunity to make things better. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about racism and what racism is. Racism is systemic. In large part, when you're talking about the true definition of racism, it's something that is inherent. It's something that is built into the system. And so they talk about white privilege, which I have a problem with that term a lot of times. But I get it because some people of color, people of color in general, I guess, if you're talking about the African American community, they were born into this system where they were pushed off to this side, and their parents were segregated, and their parents were segregated. Somewhere down the line, their parents were actually slaves, and so they were never given that opportunity to better themselves. And it kept going and kept going and kept going. And now a lot of times we wonder why those people are so angry all the time, and why they're throwing bricks through windows, which is not a rational that's not a good response.
Right.
But it makes sense when you think about this, just the system and the nature of how they got to where they're at.
Right.
And that's what's going to continue to happen with a school like this if they continue with this system in place, because that algorithm is causing it's perpetuating disadvantage, and it's not fixing the problem.
Right.
And so the best thing you can do is try to tackle it now. I don't know why it takes some lady on a semi-obscure podcast to bring this out, and maybe some people are working on it, but it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they're just going with the status quo.
Right. Well, I kind of want to go back to what you said a while ago, we kind of hit on, and get your take on it. So we both said that we don't know how to fix it. Okay, we could put out ideas out there, but we could not come up with a way to fix this. I want to hit on this because I was thinking about this earlier this week from another podcast I listened to, but I think that there's a lot things stay the way they are because people don't give their opinion on it. And what I mean by that is I think that we know something is not right, but if we put an opinion out on it and say we know this isn't right and this is why, but we don't have a way to fix it, people shut you down because you don't know how you're going to fix it. You know it's not right, but you don't know how to fix it. And I think that's why things stay the same, is because that's in general, that's anything, any kind of situation, whether it be government, whether economy, whatever it is.
Sure.
I think it's a matter of everybody knows that these so many things are wrong, but nobody has a way to fix it, or they're not in the system enough to be able to fix it, so nothing comes from it.
Right. Yeah, and that's status quo. I think that's a big reason why status quo is what it is, why things continue. But man, I think having the conversation about it, though, I think you got to talk about it. It's a good start. And the problem I have, and one of the main influences and motivations behind me wanting to have a voice in a podcast and in anything I do, whether I'm writing, when I was writing papers in college and things like that. You got to have that conversation, but there are so many people out there that don't want to hear it. If it disagrees with their viewpoints, or if it offends their sensibilities, we talk about the kids in safe spaces and things like that a lot. Nobody wants to hear it anymore. You've got to buck up and have the conversation, man. Everybody needs to chill out and quit getting offended, and start talking about things. And that's something that I had to do myself at some point, because before I really got into, I guess, the study of the system, our culture and society as a whole, and racism and the differences that we have within the system, the advantage and disadvantages that certain peoples carry with them. I didn't want to hear it either. I'm like, okay, well, how long has it been now? The Civil Rights Act was in the 1960s.
Exactly.
Get off your soapbox and let's just move forward. I didn't want to hear the conversation, but now I really listen to it. I really hear it, and it's opened up my mind. Do I still have disagreements with a lot of everything? Yeah, I disagree with just about any side on any given moment, just
Right.
depending on what the topic is. And that includes, when we're talking about racism, things like that. I still think that in a lot of ways, like the Black Lives Matter movement, I think they're missing the mark. I think it's an out of control in many respects, kind of a group that's just, I think there's probably good intentioned people in there, but they don't want to have, a lot of those people don't want to have the conversation. Okay, so you have a voice now. You have a movement, right? So use it, and let's discuss some things. Don't just yell and shout and say that I am the white devil, because that's not getting us anywhere.
Mhm.
That's just as counterproductive as me saying get off your soapbox. It's the 1960s were how many years ago.
Right.
So having that conversation and getting away from the status quo is I think is the first step to the answer. Because if nobody's talking about it, then chances are nobody's trying to fix it.
Exactly.
And I believe that's why the lady that was on there with Gail Allen really is bringing that to the forefront. Because now I'm thinking about it,
Mhm.
and I have, not to allude too much to a future episode, but I have problems with technology anyway, with the algorithms, even though I benefit from them, right?
Mhm.
I turn on Netflix, or I look at the iTunes looking for podcasts, and it's an algorithm that, is supporting that.
Right, based off of the things that they know we like already. And
Right,
stuff.
yeah, or what the people like as a whole. People that are listening to podcasts, this subculture that's flourished, that's what drives those good podcasts up to the top 150 that they have. And then you've got your top 10 in different genres, different categories.
Right.
That's an algorithm,
Mhm.
and I like that algorithm, right?
Mhm.
I just think you have to be careful with it, though. When it comes to something that involves kids at a school, for instance, when it has such an impact on human beings, then you have to take the you got to put some warmth in there, man. You can't just have a cold algorithm and say, okay, well, this is how it's going to work because we like numbers, and we're super smart, and we know how to use these computers
Mhm.
and make things calculate, and yeah. So I don't know. My answer is get some smart guys together and fix it. Okay.
That works.
That's my. I'm not your guy.
Right.
I'm not your guy for that, but I'm willing to talk about it.
Right.
So there's that.
Right. Well, two things to hit on is first thing, I agree with you completely. I think that when it comes to racism, it's ingrained in you, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that just do not like other cultures whatsoever. I think it's ingrained in them from their parents, from their grandparents, whatever. Me, I'm completely in the middle. I don't, I'm not racist whatsoever. But I can't tell you 100% that I don't have judgments when I'm walking down the street and see somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily a race thing either. That could be I could see another white man on the street and still have a judgment about them based off of how they carry themselves, what they're doing, how they look, things like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
But the other thing I want to hit on too, we haven't talked about this outside of the podcast at all, but so did you see on the whole Michael Brown thing how the parents are wanting to sue and are refusing to release the records of Michael Brown from school and medical records too, right?
I saw something about it, but I didn't delve into it. I didn't read the entire article.
They're refusing to let his medical record. I'm pretty sure it's his medical records and his school records. They're refusing to let any of that out.
Why?
Probably because they don't want the media to know that Michael Brown was not a good kid.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but what are the medical records going to say? What's that going to show?
I want to say it's medical records. I could be wrong. I don't
okay.
want to say that for sure, but I know it's his academic records and something else. I thought it was medical records too, but maybe not.
Yeah.
But I honestly think it's because they don't want to let it out that he wasn't a good kid.
Yeah.
And he didn't do well in school.
Right.
And he wasn't in. It's just not. It's not a good situation in general.
Yeah.
I think that if they let that out, it's going to be worse on the family than it is on the cop that did it.
Yeah, and it will not help their case.
Right.
You know, they're trying
Mm-hmm.
to sue, and so
Mm-hmm.
that would be evidence kind of stacked against them. So the whole Michael Brown thing, though, you know, that was you knew he was a bad kid when you saw the video of him going into that little station,
Mm-hmm.
and he just took a box of cigars or something and
Mm-hmm.
pushed the store owner down like a rag doll. And we're talking about, I think it was an 18-year-old kid, wasn't he? 18, 19, 20,
somewhere
something
around
like
there,
that.
yeah.
But he was huge. He was a man child. He was giant,
Mhm.
and this little bitty store owner he didn't have a chance.
Right.
You know, so there was no doubt that of what how he lived his life.
Right.
So it was a tragedy what happened to him. You know, in a sense, I think anytime anybody dies, I can say it's a tragedy when a bank robber is trying to take down a bank and gets shot and killed. The tragedy is his life. You know, it's not just the fact that he died, but
Exactly.
it's what brought him to that point, to such a desperate situation where he is responding in such a manner that he has to rob a bank for money. I mean, maybe he's trying to feed his kids. Maybe who knows? But
Right.
I feel like they probably could have gotten a better representative for this movement though than Michael Brown.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
But it does. I don't think we can wash out the point of the tragedy of his life though,
Exactly.
of what brought him to that place. And he is a poster child for an entire culture for a lot of people. It's that is the tragedy. It is people growing up in that kind of environment, becoming violent like that, and then at some point in time, you'll pay the price for that. But then there have been other shootings where it didn't seem like it was, there was no justification, no question for the cops to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And so once again, I think we got some police officers who are just on the hair trigger
Mhm.
because A, they're scared, and B, they are fighting against this tragedy that is, inner city, disadvantaged, poor African American people.
Well, to
there's
make-
gangs, there's criminals, and so on and so forth.
Right, but the bad thing is they instantly made it a race thing when you know that if it was a white kid that did the same exact thing, it would have been the same exact situation.
Right.
But nobody wants to look at that. They want to see it was a white cop versus a black kid, and they want to use race.
Yeah. Well, and once again, I think that the issue was legit. I do. I think that is a conversation that needed to be had. I just don't think that Michael Brown was probably the best example to set out there. I don't think
Right.
he was the best example to use.
Right.
And I think his family they're just trying to get money, man. They just want to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I can't. I have nothing to back that up. That's just from what I can tell from seeing them sit in interviews and then not wanting to give up the records and things like that. Yeah, I think they're just wanting to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
But you have your son shot, whether or not you raised him right or y'all had a good family life. Yeah, why not? Why not get paid?
Right.
At that point.
Mhm.
But yeah, so one other point that you mentioned was, okay, so here's the scenario. You're in the passenger seat of a car that's parked on the side by the sidewalk. You parked at the curb, and an African American walks up past your door. The question is, would you reach up and lock your door if he were coming by? And this I didn't make this question up.
I've heard this
is a
before, but I
common-
don't know where it came from.
Yeah, it's just a scenario to prove how racist that white people are, basically. And so I've taken a conscious effort to notice what I do in the company of different people, all kinds of different people. To be honest with you, up to this point, I know there are some Oriental gangs, some Asian gangs, in places like New York and things like that. The Japanese gangs, I forget what they're called now. They have a really cool name too.
Triads?
Something like that. Close enough. I think that was from a movie, wasn't
I think
it?
it was Fast and the Furious or
Okay,
something.
Yeah, something like that. But Asian people typically, I'm very rarely would I lock the door
Right.
on them. I don't know why. It is what it is.
Right.
Maybe that's more of an insult to them than it is to anybody else. But okay, so what I've noticed though is that if I see an African American male walking by the car and he's dressed nicely, he looks like he's maybe in business casual or even in a suit, I'm not likely to reach up and lock the door.
Exactly.
Same with a white person. Okay, if they're dressed nice, if I can see if they're not offsetting, if I feel like I'm neutralized by their appearance, I'm not likely to reach up and lock that door. Now, if I see an African American male, especially, I'm differentiating here between males and females because once again, it is what it is. Females don't tend to intimidate me. If I'm sitting in a car, I just don't have the notion to reach up and lock the door most of the time. Not that never happens, because I've seen some pretty wicked females out there too, but it's very rare. But if he's dressed, in what you would kind of consider hood or gangster type of clothes, or if he looks like he's living on the street, something like that, I'm likely to reach up and lock the door. The same would go though if you're down in some of the parts where I grew up, and you see somebody who looks like they come out of the meth trailer for the first time in a couple weeks, and they look pretty raggedy, or they look, they have that look in their eye. They just have just a crazy, intimidating type of stare about them. I'm still likely to reach up and lock that door. Now, I'm not saying that is the case for everybody. It is for me, and it's not just my opinion based off of what I want to project. I've actually taken a conscious effort to notice these things about myself, and so I just thought that was interesting for me. It's not about the color of people's skin to me so much as it is about their appearance.
Right.
And it so happens that a lot of times when you're in the inner city, you get the type of appearance that to me can come off as intimidating. If they're walking down, they're all gangster, and they look like they might like to scrap. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to feel a little intimidated by
Right.
that, and I'm going to react accordingly. It's
Well, that goes back to what I said. It don't matter white or black, Asian, whatever. If I'm walking down the street, my judgment that I make, and I know they say don't be judgmental and everything like that, but it doesn't matter. Everyone, no matter who you are, makes a judgment off of somebody based off of your first look at somebody. First, that's your first reaction to somebody.
Right.
And I think white, black, or Asian doesn't matter. If how you carry yourself is how I'm going to judge you.
right.
And like you said, a black man or a white man in a suit is not going to probably not going to mess with me as much as a white person or a black person in saggy shorts and a shirt that looks like they could be carrying a gun in their back pocket or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
right. Yeah, and that's a big difference between two terms. When you talk about racism versus being biased. I think everybody is biased. Yeah, and I think that those tree huggers or just the university types or whoever that says that they're not biased at all. I think they're lying to themselves. I think they're being disingenuous. And I think everybody is biased. It's tribal, man. We're tribal people. We were tribal for a reason. It was for protection, My tribe would battle against your tribe if you came up into our territory, or because it was a survival mechanism, because I didn't want you to get my food or my women or my children, or my water source. And so if your tribe stayed over there and my tribe stayed over here, we were fine. But since we were separated like that, we were different,
Right.
you know.
Mhm.
And so it's more than just color of the skin. You know, color of the skin that comes back, you know, to a lot of different variables and reasons why people look different. They look the way they are. But the differences that we have in that we our cultural differences, our behavioral differences, is because we're separate. We are segregated,
Mhm.
but it's been that way for thousands of years, and so we're fighting against that tribalism in the first place.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess that's for a good reason. Time will tell. You know, I think we were separated for a reason, like I said, for a good reason. Um, but now the world's getting smaller and smaller because there's, you know, the population is just keeps growing and growing and growing, and so pretty soon I don't know how much we're going to be able to separate from other people anymore. So I think it's probably better that we just start getting along
Right.
and start talking about these differences. But you know, we got to have the conversation, and so I'm ready to have the conversation about white privilege and how I have been um, you know, advantaged because of my gender and sex and my skin color. You know, I'm ready to have that conversation. I'm not going to agree with everything, but I'm to a point where I can sit down and listen to it now, and that's what I want everybody to do. Just, you know, be able to sit down, listen to it, control your emotions, control your anger, control your judgments. You know, you're still going to have them, but it doesn't mean that you have to respond in a way that is, you know, degrading for sure, or aggressive, or dismissive, or any of those things. You know, let's have a serious conversation about it and see what we can't come up with.
Right.
Let's
Exactly.
let's stop the fighting, y'all. we gotta, you know, calm down a little bit. Let's chill out and see if we can't get along.
Right. All right. Well, let's go on a little bit of a lighter note. So I gave you a few podcasts as well to listen to.
Yeah.
If you want to go ahead and hit all those.
Yeah, sure. So the first one I listened to was Spontanea Nation, and so that is a clever way of, you know, talking about I guess framing being spontaneous in your show. And so these guys and gals, there was one gal on there, they reminded me of like morning show radio, you know, radio hosts. They were, you know, 3, 4, 5 people. I don't remember how many. I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 altogether. But they were a group of people who just got together and made jokes, and they are not afraid to laugh at their own jokes, and they just sit around and laugh at each other, and really they just talked about a whole lot of nothing, but it was funny, right? So they just kind of had some quips and some quick jokes, and then toward the end of the show, last half hour or so, they got into the where they did the spontaneous what was the show? Whose line is it anyway? Type of what is it called? It's called improv.
Yeah.
They did improv, and so they just gave Fred, I guess, gave a title, and like I guess a scene,
Mm-hmm.
and so he would say what the scene was. Okay, so this is you sitting in the grocery store, and your mom just told you that you can't have chocolate milk. And so then they just go from there and they act out, you know, improvisation.
Right.
And it's pretty funny stuff. Pretty funny stuff. A little, I didn't get a whole lot of information out of it, to be honest with you.
Well, I didn't give it to you for information.
Right. But it's good for a little comedy, you know, a little comedic break.
Mhm.
And so it did the job. You know,
Yeah.
I laughed. So
That's
it was
all you
good.
can ask for.
Yeah. So the other one that I listened to was The Fighter and the Kid. I actually want to check this out a little more. I like these guys, Brendan and Brian.
Mhm.
I guess they are they both fighters, or do they
No.
fight? No.
Brendan Schaub used to be in the UFC. He used to fight in the UFC. Brian Callen is more of an actor.
Okay.
He's done a lot of stuff. He did like The Hangover 2, I think he was in, and he used to be in How I Met Your Mother, the show, and I think he does the Goldbergs now and stuff. He does. You might hear him talk about training because he does like some boxing training and stuff like that. But he's not a fighter by any means. He's a smaller guy.
Okay.
But
Yeah. So these guys, they're both very high energy. I mean, they're just. It's like they're both just itching to talk on the microphone all the time,
Mhm.
which I love because, you know, they have that They just never run out of things to say, and,
Right.
and they're always being goofy. Like for one of the stories they were talking about was one of them went to Phoenix, I believe, somewhere in Arizona, and he was climbing a mountain out there, and he was talking about the wicked kind of wildlife that could, kill you. And he was like, the tarantulas, he wasn't so much worried about that, and there was some kind of I think it was an owl or a hawk, one or the other, that would eat the tarantulas, but they could also come down and eat you or cause, wreak some havoc, cause you some pain. Wasn't worried about that. He wasn't even worried about the mountain lions because he said unless you are a female or a small child or a man with, very little testosterone, then you really don't have much to worry about because they will stay away from you. They will do whatever they can to avoid you. And then he made mention that his sack was hanging very low because he felt his manliness being up there in the mountain. So he didn't fear that. What he feared was the jaguars.
The jaguars.
The jaguars.
Mhm.
He said jaguar, I don't know, probably about 50 times.
That sounds like Brian Callen.
Yeah, and it took me a while to figure out, oh, okay, he's talking about jaguars. He's talking about a jaguar that could come, and the phrase he used was that could kill me with their face. So I thought that was pretty funny. A lot of back and forth. I mean, they talked about high def porn, which that's enough said, really.
Right.
And they talked about fighting a little bit and about how you got to have heart to fight, things like that. So, good podcast though. I would recommend The Fighter and the Kid. At this point, once again, I've only listened to one episode. I'd recommend it though because it's funny and these guys they're just quick. They're very clever and you can tell they got their wits about them. Spontaneous Nation, check it out. If you want, it won't be on my playlist. It has its funny moments, but once again, it sounds like when I'm driving in the car and I'm listening to a morning talk show
Right.
on the radio. Just kind of goofy banter, a lot of back and forth, a lot of laughing at each other and themselves, and yeah.
Right. Well, going back to Fire and the Kid, I know Brian Callen is he's very, very knowledgeable in a lot of things. So if you dig into some of those episodes, you're gonna hear him go very deep. There's a segment that they do called "Dropping Knowledge with the Kid," and he's considered the kid, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And to where he just picks something that's going on right now in the world and he just delves into it. And I mean, it's like hardcore stuff, whether it be like stuff with Russia that's going on or whatever. And I mean, he knows all there is to know about anything that you want to know about the situation he's talking about. So if you get into anything like that, we definitely ought to bring it on the show because I like it. Like I said before off air, I got away from the podcast a little bit because Brendan Shaw's banter gets to me every once in a while just because he says the same things over and over again because he thinks it's funny.
Right.
And he's got to be on every podcast, which is fine. I get that. But it's like he says the same things over and over again, so it's not so funny after you hear it for the 1,000th time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I need to get back into it, but we'll see.
And so the episode that I picked, it was just random.
Right.
You just told me to pick any episode in that podcast, so I just picked one. So this one happened to be a little more banter, just kind of two guys talking about different things, just hitting on topics. So it wasn't information filled, but I'm definitely going to continue listening to it for a while, and I'm sure they'll pop back up on our show.
Right.
Yep.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so 2017, what kind of New Year's resolutions do you got going on, bud?
I've been thinking about this, thinking about how people are always on this New Year's resolution train.
Uh-huh.
And you got to think that 95% of people, at least, it doesn't happen. They think about it for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden they're right back into their old habits and doing things the old way.
Yeah.
I really think about this when it comes to the gym because they're always considered the New Year's resolutioners that come in and they sign up, and gyms love it because they can get contracts off of these people for 2 years because they're all, high and mighty about it. They're like, I'm definitely going to get in shape and things like that. And after a month, you don't see them anymore.
Right.
So January always sucks in the gym because everything's always taken and everything from people who don't know what they're doing in there. And all that kind of stuff. But you get a little comic relief while you're in there watching some people do what they're doing, you know. But I'm not really the type to be a New Year's resolutioner, I don't guess. I've always looked at it like you can make a resolution anytime you want. Sometimes I can be bad about it's always got to be on like a Monday because it's like the new week, you know.
Yeah.
And it's always you hear people say like that I'm gonna start dieting on Monday. So like over the weekend they have to eat all the bad stuff that's in their fridge to start on Monday. Well, then once they do that, they're like, oh, well, this diet shot already. So why start? You know.
Exactly.
And I can be that way sometimes, but you know, I feel like you don't need a new year to start something.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I look at it.
Well, I think it's just it's the mindset, you know, just like with the beginning of the week.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brand new year, and so I'm going to start this new year off right. The problem is that people lose steam. I don't, you know, I think it's most people, like you said, probably somewhere in the ballpark of 95% of people lose steam after the first month or two. You know, as soon as things get a little hectic, you know, you start struggling. You can't go to the gym this day because, you know, you had to work overtime, or the wife's nagging at you to watch the kids so she can go buy soup, you know, whatever. Then, you know, the struggle then becomes real. And it's like, well, I can't go today. And then you're losing that momentum, losing that traction.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, your resolution is by the wayside, and you wait for another 10, 11 months to make a new resolution.
Right.
And so I
Mhm.
definitely agree that you should make a resolution as needed. Don't wait for the new year. You know,
Mhm.
Monday's not so bad because that happens, you know, every 7 days. So you're good there.
Right.
But don't wait another, you know, 350 or whatever, 340 something days
Right.
to make another resolution.
Mhm.
So I trick myself. I don't make New Year's resolutions, except for last year. I made a resolution not to make a resolution. I'm not sure if that counts.
How'd it work?
You know, it worked. I didn't make a resolution, so it was successful, and I
Right.
went the whole year without making one. But no, what I do is I make, you know, I set goals. You know, so splitting hairs here, right? A little semantics, if you will.
Mhm.
But I set goals, and I don't just do that at the beginning of the year, but I do it at the beginning of the year as well. And so it also gives me a platform to work with my staff at my place of employment, so I can work with them on setting new goals for the new year as points of reference, so that we can look for progress, you know, and give performance reviews and things like that.
Right.
Which I don't technically do performance reviews, but I come and we chat about how are things going? Are you getting closer to your goals? You know, that way it gives me a platform to kind of help nudge them along to you know, to improve. And that's what I think it's all about. I think we lose a lot of that momentum, a lot of that steam, because we're wanting it all. We want it now, and I know this better than anybody. I'm probably one of the most impatient guys you'll ever meet.
You're looking at one here too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I want something to happen, I want it done yesterday. And that's a struggle because I get frustrated. I think that's a lot of people. But progress is what it's all about. It's about making yourself better. And so if your New Year's resolution is to lose 50 pounds, which is a lot, maybe 25 is a little more realistic, but you only lose 15, you've made progress. And so you got to build off that success and try to keep that momentum, you know, going, or at least stay at that weight of losing, you know, whatever you were after you lost that 15 pounds. At least maintain that, you know, and don't just go on a binge, you know, crazy buffet style, like mad eating extravaganza
Right.
because you didn't hit your 25-pound goal. You know, go with the 15. It's an improvement. So rock it out.
Right.
You know.
Well, speaking of that, I think I might have mentioned. Did you get to listen to the "Who Is Fat" episode of Joe Rogan?
No, I didn't.
No.
You've told me about
Oh
it.
man, it was so good. Tom Segura ended up losing like he went from like 267 down to like 216.
Wow.
Yeah, and Bert Kreischer went from I want to say it was like maybe 259, something like that, down to like 219, something like that. So it was really close. But so they had Ari Shafir. I don't know if you know who he is or not, but he's another stand-up comic and stuff too. He's good friends with all of them. Well, he wanted to go off of the BMI body body measurement index. Is that right?
Body mass index.
Mass index. I don't know why I thought measurement. Anyways, he wanted for their height and weight. He wanted them. They had to be less than obese based off of their height and weight on the BMI, right?
Mhm.
So based off their height and weight, they had to be both of them had to be under 227 to get it. Well, if they were able to do that, just to be overweight, they were still considered overweight, but just not obese anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So he said that he would pay for their trip because they were putting a trip on the line. So basically, if Tom would have won, he would have paid for wherever Bert wanted to go. If Bert would have won, Tom would have paid for wherever he wanted to go. Tom wanted to go to Paris for a big soccer game. Okay. Well, if they both got under that BMI, Ari Shafir was going to take over and pay for the entire flight, or the whole thing. It's going to be like 25 grand to do.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, he flipped out about it so bad because he didn't ever think it would be possible if they could do it. Well, they did it. So Joe Rogan just told him on the podcast, he's like, I feel like you guys helped me out by doing this weigh-in and everything on my podcast, and I know that Ari didn't want to pay for it, so I'm going to pay for it for you guys to go.
Wow.
Yeah. And Bert, they're like, what? No, that's not happening. He goes, no, you helped me out by doing this, so I'm going to pay for it. So now Rogan's paying for their entire thing. But if you ever get a chance, there's 2 episodes of it. They did 2 weigh-ins. They did one on the first day, and to where they could get 2 different weights, and so let's say Tom won the first day by 2 pounds, Bert would at least have to come back the next day and beat him by at least 3 pounds to win the whole thing. Tom ended up winning and got to shave Bert's beard and all this other kind of stuff too. And then Bert posted a thing on Instagram of him coming home and his kids ran away from him and stuff, freaking out because they haven't seen him without a beard for ever. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
Pretty funny episode.
Who's this clean-shaven, skinny man walking in?
Right.
Run for your lives.
Right.
How did they lose all that weight? Do you know? What did they do?
A lot of working out and stuff. They both had 2 different ways of doing it. Tom did a lot of working out. He did a lot of water depletion and stuff like that too. He sat in the sauna a lot and all that kind of stuff, But Bert did a lot of running 15 miles a day type of stuff.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that they necessarily did it the healthiest way because they've never done diets like this before and, trained like this before and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they definitely could have made it go longer and done it the right way and not dehydrated themselves so bad towards the end and stuff. But it was definitely 2 neat episodes, and Rogan was just freaking out. He was like, holy crap, you guys got to be kidding me. And just looking at him, you see their faces are so much smaller and everything is neat.
I think that's a better motivation than a resolution by far is getting into competition with someone,
I agree.
I've been in competitions like that. Actually gaining weight, I think at one time I was actually in competition with that because I used to be really skinny. But also quitting smoking, it was the accountability. Me and my friend were quitting at the same time, and so you didn't want to be the one to take the first puff. You wanted him to be. And then when he did, I would start smoking again. So it didn't work out so well. But the competition, it was a solid method to do it.
Well, the funny thing was that it was the perfect for them to do because the way they did it. They explain on the podcast the origin of everything, but basically, they started out with this whole Tom called Bert fat and went on this whole thing. Well, they started making shirts. So, but Tom and Bert are best friends. So they did this whole thing together. So Bert put out shirts that said Tom is fat. Tom put out shirts that says #Bert is fat. They sold them all together and split the profit. But you've got hardcore fans for each side, but it was getting bad online. They were telling a story about one of their friends, their mom had died or something. And they posted online saying my mom died or whatever. I think this was Bert's friend. So Bert would get online or would read the comments underneath this thread, and one of them would be like, did Tom's mom or did Tom sit on you or sit on your mom or something like that? You know, just these really bad comments that people just don't care.
Wow.
Yeah, and it got hardcore where like people were like threatening each, you know, Bert or Tom because of the whole situation and stuff because they're hardcore fans for the other side and stuff. It got really bad, and they're like, "We're best friends. This is just a competition. We're just joking around." But people just couldn't get it. They had to be hardcore one side or the other.
Yeah, man, it's competition. It's like when your sports team, especially soccer fans, man, those guys are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, people will get out and riot because their team won the Super Bowl or the NBA championship or whatever.
Mhm.
Man, competition is not just about the competitors themselves; it's about the fan base.
Mm-hmm.
Things get a little hairy sometimes.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. They lost that much weight though,
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard to do, man. Even just trying to, um, I'm trying to drop like 15 pounds right now. In certain spots, like I want to lose it in my gut, right? Don't necessarily want to lose it anywhere else, but
Right.
it's just not easy. And I guess maybe if you're not targeting the gut area, for instance, then it might be a little easier just to lose weight in general.
Right.
But if you're trying to stay stay solid in your core up top, but lose that gut, trim that down, that target area is really difficult. So got to commend those guys, man. That's good.
Yeah. Well, not to go too far into it, but I know there's bad thing is that fat is fat. So if you're running on a treadmill every day or you're, you know, dieting or whatever, fat's going to be, you know, come off in all different areas. You can't, you know, it's not easy to just target one area, you know, but I've always been a believer in abs come from the kitchen.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, if you're going to lose that gut, it's going to be based off what you're eating, not so much, you know, if you're doing sit-ups every day or, you know, whatever. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. I just want that when I do get that gut trimmed down, I want there to be muscle down there. So you want to go ahead and work your abs out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's going to cause you to lose the fat. It's definitely. I'm cutting down a lot of my sweets, man. I got through the Christmas experience, the craziness, which is usually a time when I gorge on fudge, especially of the peanut butter persuasion, because
Mhm.
it's absolutely delicious.
Mm-hmm.
But just sweets in general. I stayed away from them, man. I didn't hardly touch any sweets this Christmas, and so I didn't really have a resolution per se, or even really. I do have a goal, but it started a month before or so that New Year's even came about.
Right.
So it just kind of worked out that way, and
Mhm.
I've got some momentum going now. So I'm gonna try to keep it up and see if I can't trim down a little bit.
There you go. But you know, you do some lifting and stuff like that too, and you know, building muscle and burning fat at the same time is your best bet. You know, I'm not saying you can't do either or, but it's a lot easier. I always looked at it as I've always been a skinny guy, so it's hard for me to build muscle. And then I'll look at a friend or somebody who is bigger or whatever, and they always say, I just want to lose weight, I don't want to build a lot of muscle or whatever. And I always tell them, like, it's a lot easier to turn fat into muscle than it is to build muscle from nothing.
Right.
So I've always been the skinny guy, so it's always been a lot harder for me to build muscle because I don't have fat to turn into muscle or anything. It's just a matter of working my butt off and trying to eat as much as I can. See, I'm on the opposite side of the scale from most people.
Yeah.
I try to eat all I can just to gain anything, so.
Yeah. The struggle's real.
It is.
Either way you go, man.
Yeah.
It's a battle to try to get that chiseled physique that we all aspire to, except for those guys with the dad bod. Have you seen that trend? You know what the dad bod is?
I know what it is, and I know that it's all just a way for people to be lazy.
I think you're onto something there. But, okay, so the dad bod, just to explain it, is basically having a big gut and little bitty biceps and no muscle physique, no muscular physique. It looks like the guys are just being lazy. But I have a little conspiracy attached to this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a conspiracy for certain people to emasculate a big cross section of the male population,
Okay.
And I have some other points to back this up. If you look at, I think I might have seen it on a meme, but I did the research. They're having these fashion shows now where these guys, you know, model guys, I mean, a lot of them are kind of, you know, I don't know, they are what they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little sissified is a good way to put it.
Okay.
But they're traipsing down the runway, right, like models do, in this female-looking attire, like dresses, and they're carrying purses. But it's not even like, it's not even classy. I mean, it's weird.
Okay.
At least, you know, a lot of it's revealing, but they're wearing dresses. This one guy was wearing a full-out dress, you know, just like a woman's dress, something she'd wear to, you know, like church or, I don't know, maybe a job interview or something, carrying a purse, and they are disseminating this kind of new man. You know, you had the metrosexual, and you've got man purses, also known as a merce,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or European shoulder bag, I think is what one guy called it on a commercial. But I think it's kind of a conspiracy to emasculate. Maybe it's a feminist inspired conspiracy, you know, to emasculate people. Because who thinks that a big gut and no tan, and which no tan, I have trouble with that myself. I'm a whitey big time, but and little bitty biceps, no muscular physique whatsoever. Do people really find that attractive? How did that trend come about, really, you know?
The dad bod hasn't been around that long, I don't think.
No,
Well,
it
I take it back. The dad bod itself has been around for a very long time.
Since the beginning of time, maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But the trend of it, it hasn't been around that long. But I compare it to the female version of Real Women Have Curves, basically meaning that women can be thick. And I'm not bashing anybody or downing anybody for how they want to look, how they want to feel, or anything like that. It's just a matter of they don't want to put in the work to be what other women that do look or to be in great shape and things like that. They don't want to put in the work to look like that, but they don't want to be discriminated against for not looking like that.
Right.
So I think the dad bod comes in is the same scenario.
Well, first of all, I think that you're going to have probably a gang of women outside of your sliding glass door here with pitchforks and torches.
That's a good possibility.
Trying to lynch you for that previous comment. But no, I think you're right to an extent. But I do think it's more difficult for a lot of women because they do bear children, you know, and that really wrecks the body in a lot of ways.
That's true, and that's like I said, I'm not discriminating against anybody
Sure.
whatsoever. That's where what I compare it to. That's where I see it coming from.
Yeah, and I think it's harder for women because they're scrutinized more. You know, there's a cultural expectation that
Right.
we have,
Right.
you know, for women to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there's bound to be some laziness in there too,
Mm-hmm.
with the dad bod as well. I think it does give the guy an excuse to be lazy. You know, I'm down with that theory, but I just don't see how that becomes a trend. You know how and they're not basing it off of the guy's lack of activity. You know, whether it's working out or just
Mm-hmm.
staying active. However, you know, it's based on the way that he looks.
Right.
And I don't buy that, you know. I don't, and guys don't have to face as much scrutiny. Okay, so the dad bod, like you said, has been around for, you know, probably, you know, a long time at least. Probably not since the caveman days because they were out running around chasing food and
Right.
running from saber-toothed tigers and whatnot.
Right.
But it's been around for a long time,
Mhm.
especially, you know, in our society in Western culture. But as a trend, there has to be some kind of conspiracy behind that, man. I can't let it go. There has to be something more there. That's not sexy. It's not sexy.
Right.
You know, there's nobody thinking that's sexy. You don't have to scrutinize a guy. Okay, he can put on a loose fitting shirt and still look, you know, just as good as 50% of the other guys out there.
Mhm.
But to say that is a trend that people should aspire to, nah, something's fishy, man. I smell bull crap. I do in a big way. So I don't even know if that trend is still around. It seems like it was here and gone. I don't know. But 2017 is bound to have some. What do you think's coming? We're going to see some crazy stuff, man.
I think we our last episode we kind of encapsulated what all our thoughts on 2016. I think 2017 has to be a better year. We had so many deaths in 2016 up to the last minute of 2016.
Dropping like
They
flies.
were just dropping. 2016 was just such a crazy year, especially with the election and all this other stuff. But I don't know even where to set my expectations for 2017. Mainly because, especially with Trump, to be honest, it seems like already he's doing some great things, and he hasn't even sat in the seat yet. But we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. With that, we don't necessarily have to go into politics or anything, but I'm just throwing that out there because that was a major part of 2016.
I think 2017 and Trump are synonymous right now. I mean, I think any conversation you have about expectations or predictions in 2017, you got to have Trump in there somewhere.
Right.
It's just he's going to make such a huge impact one way or the other. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I can't stand. I hear it all over the place, man. Where people they're just already like assigning him as a failure across the board. He's not going to do anything good whatsoever. I don't know, some of the cabinet choices that he's made, things like that does worry me, because he's gotten in some of the CEOs, big money, blah blah blah, same old type of stuff. But I don't know, man. Maybe he's got some kind of a plan behind this. Maybe not. Maybe it was all a facade.
Well, what do you think about how he's been attacking Facebook, and by attacking I mean using the crap out of it to get out his ideas? Do you think that it's really smart for him to do what he's doing?
Yeah, he's a Twitter guy, man. Especially
Right.
he tweets probably just about as much or more than anybody else that is out there right now. And I think it's super smart. I think it's a super smart tactic, because
he's like giving in to this day and age and using the same concepts as everybody else uses to get things out there.
Yeah, definitely that. But man, when he goes on the mainstream media, I mean, we talk about the mainstream media and how much it, just a abysmal failure that it is at this point in time. That it's not, it's all skewed, one way or the other, whatever. But he goes on the mainstream media and he gets knocked out. They're just not having it. They're reporting all the, they're just shading him in a negative light constantly. Right. So he's kind of using a grassroots system, a grassroots approach to speak with people. And who are the tweeters, the tweeters, the Twitterers or the tweeters?
I don't know.
Okay, I don't either. It's obviously not me.
Right.
I don't even know the lingo very well. But he's using that to get his message across to a generation that is growing up and developing using these social media apparati. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Once again,
I don't know
apparatuses.
I like apparati.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Sounds
If
like
it's not
it's like a Japanese dish.
Yeah, sounds tasty too. I don't know, as long as there's no raw fish. I don't do sushi.
You don't?
Yeah, but anyway, he's using what's out there as the machine for his message. I think it's super smart. Now, whether or not his presidency ends up being positive, or if 2017, bears fruit of, some of the changes that he was talking about making. For me, I don't really care so much about the wall, one way or the other. I never really expected it to really happen the way that he was, saying that it would in the campaign.
Right.
I don't really care. We do have to do something about our southern border. I think that's important. You got to control your, who's in your country. Now, I think that just makes common sense. And anybody that says that doesn't make sense, I think they're living on a different planet. They're not in touch with reality as it is. But yeah, I mean, I think some of the positive effects he can have are going to be on the economy, and it's going to be hopefully on getting lobbyists out of Washington on big money in politics. And we're talking about a guy who was big money in politics.
Right.
That's why I think it's so interesting. I'm just fascinated by his approach. And so, yeah, it could completely be his way of totally snowing, especially the Republican Party and people like you and me, snowing us with these campaign promises and things like that he's going to do. And he's going to turn around and he's going to bank and then, mic drop and walk off stage, exit stage left. But it's fascinating though. Either way, I mean, this could all come crashing down, and that would suck, but it would still be ultimately fascinating to me because it's just so different. We haven't seen nothing like this.
Right. Well, but I mean, have you seen the things? I've gotten this from social media, but the things that he's been doing by the jobs he's bringing to the U.S. already, like
Yeah.
with Ford and all this stuff.
Mhm.
You know, these people are refusing to pay the tax that he's going to be putting on the border tax that he's going to put on all this stuff. They're refusing to pay that, so they're bringing jobs into us.
Right.
You know, that's he's making, like I said, he's making major moves already and he hasn't even sat in the chair yet.
Exactly. And he's getting no props.
Right.
He's getting no accolades from anybody who dislikes him. They once again, they're not willing to have the conversation. What if Trump ends up being productive for our country?
Mhm.
You know, what if? No, they won't hear it. They won't have that conversation yet. And I don't think they ever will. You know, I don't think they ever will.
Yeah. I mean, they're always going to look at all the drawbacks, and they're going to look at everything that he wasn't. I mean, he could spend 8 years in office and not get done, you know, a quarter of what everybody wants done.
Yeah.
And even if he does great things, if in 8 years, they're still going to only look at the bad things that he did or what he wasn't able to achieve.
Right.
It doesn't matter that no matter who was in office, they're not going to be able to achieve everything, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's an ego thing for one, and two, you got all the people who wanted Hillary so bad, and business as usual. You know, we've talked about it before. But apparently enough people didn't want business as usual, so I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. Like I said, I don't know where my expectations should lie, and I don't know if I have any. To be, I mean, expectations of good things, of course, but I don't necessarily think I have high expectations for any one thing, major great thing to happen.
Yeah. You know, I'm just gonna make some popcorn, sit back, and watch the show.
There you go.
You know, I'm gonna talk about it on the podcast. I'm gonna pay attention, see what's going on. Cautiously optimistic is my perspective right now, and hopefully I get some payback for that, for the optimism. You know,
Right.
But I can't help but be cautious. You know, I would be cautious regardless, but especially because it's Trump. You know, in a way, I guess in the back of my mind, I'm just kind of waiting for the bomb to drop. Oh, okay, this is what he's doing, and so now it makes sense that everybody's so negative.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I'm just waiting. I think good things can happen. Who knows? So
I agree.
fascinating to say the least.
That's right.
So one more thing I wanted to get to is the CES. What is that? The Car and Electronics Show, I think is what it's called. They just had a show. You know, they had a get together where they display new technology and new cars, things like that. And so the big thing right now is the autonomous cars, the self-driving cars. Just kind of, I guess, want to know your thoughts. I want your opinion on this, and then I'll give mine. Good, bad, neutral, concerns, whatever.
It scares me more than anything.
Why?
Because you're literally taking your own control away from the vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about let me put it this way. So it's the gun issue has been such a huge issue, right? That they don't want basically they want guns taken away.
Sure.
Basically, I think that's but they want to put people in cars that are going to drive themselves. How is a car any different than a gun is when you're talking about endangering people and killing people? You're talking about a huge piece of metal that can run into anybody, or not even run into anybody, run off a cliff or whatever, and you're going to be willing to just sit in it and let it take you where it wants you to go. I don't know. It freaks me out. I know there's a lot of cars out there now that aren't completely driverless, but that they can when they're on like straight stretches like highway or something like that, because they can read the lines on the road and stuff like that. I don't think they can do like really curvy roads and stuff, or at least be safe with it. But I've talked about this even when it came out maybe a couple of years ago with the car that can parallel park itself and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That freaks me out. There's no way I'm letting a vehicle do that itself with me in it. especially because the first time that hits another car, what are you supposed to do? You know, can you? I mean, can you sue the company because your car hit another car? Are they going to blame you and say that you were driving it, or what? You know, I don't. There's a lot of things in there that drive me nuts. I don't know.
So your first point was taking the control away, and one argument that I've heard is that there's a lot of crappy drivers out there. There's a lot of drunk drivers out there. There are a lot of people who just suck. They're not good drivers.
Well, let me jump in on that real quick though. Okay, so with that point, a lot of drunk drivers out there. So are they going to make it legal to drive a vehicle intoxicated if you're not driving it? If it's self-driving you?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would think at some point in time, it's like getting in a taxi.
That's crazy.
Why not?
Crazy.
So there is an advantage there, and maybe we don't go full automation. Maybe we just go, designated driver, autonomous cars. That's probably a $1 billion idea I just put out there. Don't steal my idea, anybody who's listening to this. But
that's okay. We don't have any.
It's true. I'm like you. I'm worried about the control, and it's not just that the car's in control of itself, though. There are, once again, algorithms to this. There are satellites, which is, in essence, you're talking about computers. And we all know that computers can be hacked, And so what's going to happen when someone hacks into the machine that's controlling all these cars, the machine that's controlling the satellite that's through GPS controlling the cars? What happens when that gets hacked? Then what do? That's when you start driving off cliffs and running into bridge embankments and running over a group of nuns that were on their way to evening mass. Sometimes they do that. They walk in droves to evening mass and you plow right through them, and it wouldn't even be your fault.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the overall, invasiveness of technology and where it's going. Period. Once again, there's some conspiracy to back this up too, if you're into such things. Alex Jones talks about it a little bit on his show, but they're just, the man, the shadow government. They're wanting to take as much control away from the commoners as possible. Is that the case? The thing about conspiracies with me is I always find that there's possibilities that lie in there, and the truth is probably somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But the possibility of that, I think, is real. And like you, I don't want that control taken away from me. I want to be in control of my vehicle.
Right. Although
I will admit that there are times when I think, man, if I had an autonomous car right now, I could just lay back and take a nap till I get to my,
Right. That's my point too. Is that scares the crap out of me to think that we're on a road to where somebody can just type in their GPS or whatever, however the car works.
Yeah.
To say, I want to take me to Walmart or the grocery store or whatever, and then you just lay your seat back and take a nap, and then you have all these cars on the road doing that same thing.
Right.
That how scary is that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a brave new world out there. And so for us, like, to take the steering wheel out of my hands, you'll have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was in an autonomous car and I had the chance to take a nap, chances are I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't be able to I'd have to have my attention,
Mm-hmm.
Intact. I have to be alert because I'm not trusting this automobile. But think about, like, my children. If they were all self-driving cars on the road, by the time they're driving, they won't really know the difference. And so they would probably be completely comfortable with the notion that this car's got control because it would be all they know.
Right.
Think about their children. Okay. And so this is something it seems like it's the momentum is there and it's going to happen, at least to some degree. They're at least going to try it. I don't see it working. I mean,
Right.
I really don't, but who knows? I mean, with technology nowadays, they can send little nano robots into your body and they can do all kinds of stuff,
That's true.
For like, surgery and things like that.
I just wonder, like, when you think about places like L.A. or places that are constant traffic jams where like here it would take us 15 minutes to get somewhere.
Yeah.
There it takes you 4 hours to get somewhere. I'm curious if the intention is to make that somehow easier by doing this. Because I'm sure if you're in a self-driving car that you can't. I don't know if you could adjust the speed or not, or if the car's set to know by satellite or whatever what the speed limit is, so it doesn't go over that, or whatever. I'm curious if everybody's going the same speed limit or whatever, if that makes situations worse in that kind of an area, or if it makes it a lot better, or what.
I have to think that's probably a consideration in all this,
You would
because
think.
I really don't understand the big motivation behind self-driving cars.
Right.
What is the major problem that we're trying to solve here? I don't get that. It's not like they're curing cancer or anything. I could see it as a convenience issue, and maybe it'll solve some traffic issues. Another thing, though, that it's taking the control away from is the speed limit that you mentioned. Sometimes I'm in a hurry,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to go 5 or 10 miles over the speed limit. I take that risk. I do it carefully, mind you, but I take that risk of getting pulled over by a police officer because, well, it's a calculated risk,
Mm-hmm.
because I need to get to my destination within a certain amount of time. A self-driving car, I'm sure they would take that. They would take that option away.
Well,
Because
that's my point too. Is that if you're in a car with somebody, if you're driving and the person that's in the passenger seat has a heart attack or something, you can't go to the speed limit to get to the hospital. I mean,
Right.
there's got to be a consideration there, emergency switch or something that you've got to have. Like I said, I'm just pulling all this out of my butt. I have no idea how
it's a great question.
I have
great
no
point.
idea how the self-driving car works or anything. I just figure that if you put it in self-driving mode or however it goes, that it still has to obey the laws of the road and stuff like that too. So there's got to be something to where you got to be able to get somewhere faster if you need to,
Right.
or something. I don't know.
Yeah. What if you got your wife with you and she goes into labor?
Right. Mm-hmm.
How's that going to work?
Right.
You're going to have a baby in your driverless car.
Do you think they'll ever switch like ambulances and stuff to self-driving?
I
Or you think they'll always keep that the same way? Police cars and
who knows what the future might hold, but that's another complexity that, as of right now, you just don't see it being able to happen. The first thing they're doing, and this is happening, is that they are the first autonomous vehicles are big rigs, the trucks that carry the
Right.
trailers that bring us all the goods that we buy at the stores that we shop at.
right.
That's happening. I'm not sure what the big deal is there either, aside from the fact that you got these truck drivers who, were infamous in years past for, staying awake via, caffeine pills and other drugs, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just coffee, but you're driving, 12, 14, 16 hours to get to your destination, which
Right.
they have pretty strict laws nowadays where you have to, keep books, and they check those books and so on and so forth. So they try and minimize, a zombified truck driver being out on the highways anyway. But that's happening for one reason or another. The self-driving big rigs that's going to bring all your foods and your other supplies to Walmart and wherever else that you happen to shop. But please try not to shop at Walmart. But anyway, that's happening, and so they're starting with that. And another argument that I've heard is that that's taking away a lot of jobs. A lot of
Well,
jobs.
I'm sure. Truck driving is a huge business.
It's one of the biggest employments opportunity, one of the biggest jobs in numbers that is in our country.
Mm-hmm.
There's trucks everywhere all the time. I mean, you've got Walmarts in every stinking town. Even the small little, podunk towns that you go to usually has a Walmart.
But I have to imagine that I can't see, and I might be wrong, but I can't see. You would think you'd still have to have a driver in the vehicle no matter what. You can't think that you're going to have a big rig truck and you just set it and let it go, and it drives from Arkansas to Alabama by itself, and then parks itself in the parking lot, and then they just pull what it needs, and it turns around and goes back on its own.
I don't know, dude. Maybe there's somebody that catches it at the destination, and so they back it into where it's supposed to go. Who knows? I mean, they're putting rovers on Mars, man, and sending pictures back, and you can see every little dip and hill and.
Are you sure? You want to get into conspiracies on this?
Well, I mean,
sure we've done that on Mars?
Touche.
You sure we've been to the moon?
Touche. You got me on that one. But yeah, it's coming one way or the other. So, 2017 is going to be an interesting year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to continuing our analyses of 2017 via this podcast.
I agree, man, and I agree with you. I think cautiously optimistic is where everybody needs to be at.
Word.
I think we need to keep 2016 where it's at and try not to let it roll over into the new year.
Water off a duck's back.
That's right.
Yeah, let's keep rolling.
Yep.
All right, buddy. Hey, thanks for checking out the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast. Please make sure to tell your friends. Help us get out there and spread the word. And also don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube page and also like the Facebook page for the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast. We'll see y'all next time.
This has been another edition of the Cerebral